Hello and welcome to Ms. Cooper's art class. Today I'm going to be showing you how I doodle with ballpoint pens in a way that also makes me get a little bit better at using them. I'm using some Papermate Inkjoy ballpoint pens for this, but you could use any kind. I do find it's more fun if you use a couple colors. So I have some brown, some lime green, and some dark blue. Those are just the colors I was feeling that day. I really like the dark brown and the blue. The green is a little iffy, but this is a good way to use up the pen and get a little more used to that ink texture. So basically, the only thing you need to know before you start this kind of thing is kind of how to make a value scale with a ballpoint pen. I've sped this up, but what you'll notice is that I'm taking all of my lines for my shading in the same direction. I'm hatching, and I'm letting go of the pressure as I go. And you can do this a couple times to practice if you want to before you get started. The next step that I do is I kind of draw these weird kind of I want to call them almond shapes, kind of rope or braid segments, eye shapes, whatever you want to call these. These are kind of nice for just learning how to draw and how to shade because they're pretty big. They're kind of a forgiving shape, and you'll see how this works as I go through it. But I don't really spend time making them look a certain way. I wanted them to more or less fill the paper, but have some white space in the background as I went. And so then the first thing you do is you take one of your dark colors and you add some dark shading to the two ends, but then as you go, you decide how you want that shading to work. Do you want to build up a lot of dark areas, just a little bit? Is there an area of of emphasis that you want people to look at? I do make sure that I keep all of my lines going the same direction. I have another tutorial where I talk about ballpoint pen and line direction and how that's kind of important. The other thing that you can think about while you're doing this kind of doodle or following this kind of tutorial is that, as you slow down, you can see I'm making a lot of tick marks that are not quite touching each other. And if you were shading something like skin, that would be a little difficult. But when you're doing something like this, it's okay that those little tick marks don't quite touch each other. You can fill in any big empty spaces by adding more tick marks and more lines. But as I'm speeding through this is definitely sped up by a lot. You'll notice that not all of the lines touch and it gives it a little more of a hairy texture, and that's okay because this is more of a doodle, more of an exercise. This isn't a particular project. There's no way this has to look exactly when I'm done with it. So when I'm making choices about where to apply my different colors or where to add more shading, more shadows, more highlights, there's no exact spot where I have to do it. I'm not looking at a reference image for this one. I didn't look at hair or a rope. I just kind of made it up because then if I was using a reference image and I was working through things that way, I would already feel kind of comfortable using these line directions. So if you're somebody who wants to get into doing portraits, for example, with ballpoint pen, this kind of thing can make you more comfortable with hair before you have to shade any actual hair. So that's the lovely thing about doodling in this kind of way. Now, when people see videos like this, they usually want to know how long it took to build up something like this. Um, and I forgot exactly how long all of this footage was before I edited it down and sped it up. But I think it was somewhere around probably like 4 hours because I kind of still want my shading to look a certain way. I had some ideas of what I wanted it to look like. I wanted to smooth it out just a little bit as I went. So for me, this took about 4 hours. I know some people definitely work faster than I do with ballpoint pen, and some people might want to take more time. But the nice thing is you could just choose to do all of these sections a little bit smaller, or just do less of them. Maybe when you're doodling, you watch this video, but then you think of an entirely different shape that you would rather shade, or your doodling turns into something else. It could be something that you do really quickly on a post-it note during a meeting and then you throw away, or you could kind of keep it as a little pet project, just kind of tuck it away in the front of a binder or something, and then just kind of keep going every time you're sitting down for a meeting and just kind of add to it just a little bit until it's done. But you can see as it builds up that, one of these little segments alone is interesting enough, but when you add a bunch of them, it starts to look really cool. So I would advise keeping it as just a little pet project on the side. Kind of a nice, relaxing thing to do while you talk to other people. I'm doing this on a piece of just regular printer paper that I cut down. It's just in half. And you'll probably notice that there's a bunch of papers underneath it. That's because the desk I was working at had a bit of a rougher surface texture, and I didn't want to take a rubbing of that when I was working on this doodle. So I just put about 3 pieces of paper underneath it just to give it a little bit of cushion and to help my shading be just a little bit smoother. Anytime I'm working in ballpoint pen, I do that, especially if it's a really nice drawing that I do intend to show somewhere. I always make sure there's a little bit of cushioning underneath just in case. If there's anything like eraser shavings on the desk or anything, they might still show through, but barely. The paper is there to cushion it. If you're doing a doodle that is kind of like this and you were to get kind of a strange texture, it's easy enough to cover up. You can just make that area a little bit darker. But if you were doing an artwork that had to look a certain way, if you were working off of a photo, you really wouldn't want those little marks showing through underneath. That would be pretty annoying. When I was all done with this, I felt like the white space almost stood out just a little bit too much, so I started adding little hairs, little threads coming off of these kind of ropes or braids or whatever these are. And I just started filling the background with some of those and with some little accent lines, kind of made it look like little pieces of them were floating around. Um, it's all right. It's not my favorite thing. I maybe would have slowed down on the background a little bit, but I like it well enough for a nice relaxing doodle. Anyway, thank you so much for watching and for checking this out. If you have any questions, you can always comment below, leave some feedback if you need to. Tell me what colors you would use. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy.